Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, board-certified criminal defense lawyer. Today we're reacting to the closing arguments on both sides in the Depp versus Heard case. Now, I've been in trials that lasted a long time, and 6 weeks is a long time to be in trial. I mean, it just is. You get to know everybody around you, and you better start liking people because it could be a long 6 weeks. But closing arguments, are different than an opening statement. Opening statement, all you can really do in an opening statement is say the evidence will show. It's just kind of an introduction to what the case is about. You can't argue your case in an opening statement. All you can really do in your opening statement is basically introduce the jury to the case. Now, when it comes time for closing argument, though, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you can win a case based on your closing argument. And this is the time where you argue the case, and they only get so much time because the judge is timing this, and you really have to be strategic. And in this case, they have so much to draw from, so you have to be really strategic. So let's get into it. Camille starts it out.
2016. Ms. Heard walked into a courthouse in Los Angeles, California, to get a no-notice ex-parte restraining order against Mr. Depp, and in doing so, ruined his life by falsely telling the world that she was a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of Mr. Depp.
So she's going right after her, by falsely telling the world, by getting a no-notice. What a no-notice is, it's an ex parte. So in order to get the restraining order, all you have to do is allege that there's some kind of abuse. Judges will sign it as if it's a leaf coming blowing in the window.
Today, on May 27th, 2022, exactly 6 years later, we ask you to give Mr. Depp his life back by telling the world that Mr. Depp is not the abuser Ms. Heard said he is, and hold Ms. Heard accountable for her lies. Now it's time for you, the jury, to come to a decision. You have been entrusted with a serious task. What is at stake in this trial is a man's good name. Even more than that, what is at stake at this trial is a man's life.
Now here's the thing. When you were advocating for your client, and I've actually teared up in closing arguments before. One U.S. attorney called me "Cry Me a River," But here's the thing: first of all, I guarantee you, Camille and the whole team is very attached to Johnny Depp. They believe in their cause. They know what they're doing. And so it becomes emotional, and it becomes a mission.
The life that he lost when he was accused of a heinous crime, and the life he could live when he is finally vindicated. Exactly 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court and filed a false report of domestic abuse against her husband of 15 months, Johnny Depp. The scene was a setup. She tipped off the paparazzi so they would be waiting. They knew exactly where she would pause, which side of her face to photograph. And the photos captured what she wanted them to see, the image of a battered woman. What the paparazzi did not know is that the dark mark on her face mysteriously appeared 6 days after last seeing Mr. Depp.
So you probably wouldn't have that bruising 6 days later, and that's critical. And then all of a sudden you see the other photograph of her. I really like Camille's presence. She's to the point. She's not over the top, but she's kind of cold.
It was a lie. She knew it. Mr. Depp knew it. And the multiple witnesses you heard from who saw her that week of May 21st, 2016, also knew it.
when I say cold, I'm not saying that she's like off-putting, or I mean, when I say cold, I mean she's like a laser. She knows exactly what she's going to say. She knows how to say it, and she's very prepared.
But the world only saw what she wanted them to see. 2 years later, when promoting the biggest role of her career until this trial, Ms. Heard presented herself to the world as a public figure representing domestic abuse. The headline of the op-ed featured the term sexual violence, even though she had never before accused her ex-husband of such a heinous crime. Ms. Heard and her lawyers love to remind you of how the op-ed did not mention Mr. Depp by name. But Ms. Heard made sure that there would be no mistake about who she was referring to. She inserted 2 years ago, so the world would remember the photo of a battered woman, the mark on her face, standing outside the courthouse.
So that's an important point, because this isn't just about domestic violence or this or that. It is about defamation, and she has to get all the elements out.
And they would once again see Mr. Depp as the villain, this time in full swing of the Me Too movement. But what was happening behind closed doors was quite different from what Ms. Heard presented to the world. The exact opposite, in fact. There is an abuser in this courtroom, but it is not Mr. Depp. And there is a victim of domestic abuse in this courtroom, but it is not Ms. Heard. The evidence presented at this trial has shown that Ms. Heard is in fact the abuser, and Mr. Depp the abused. As you heard from Mr. Depp and multiple other witnesses that testified under oath at this trial, Mr. Depp experienced persistent verbal, physical, and emotional abuse by Ms. Heard during their relationship. You heard from Mr. Depp about how often Ms. Heard would berate him, insult him, and physically attack him.
So, and there's actual recordings and video to back up what she's saying and to back up Johnny Depp's claims. It is just remarkable that there isn't one single piece of audio or video that she has taken that corroborates him abusing her.
Including one of the most serious occasions when Ms. Heard threw a vodka bottle at Mr. Depp, severely injuring his finger, and then put a cigarette out on his face. You heard from Mr. Depp that this whole incident in Australia started because Ms. Heard was enraged that Mr. Depp wanted a post-nuptial agreement, and she wasn't in his will, just a month after getting married. You also heard from Tara Roberts.
Well, that would piss any woman off.
A manager at Mr. Depp's island who witnessed Ms. Heard telling Mr. Depp that he was washed up and would die fat and lonely. You also heard from Ms. Roberts that she witnessed Ms. Heard clawing and grabbing at Mr. Depp, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back to her, and Mr. Depp had a visible injury to his nose on that occasion. Most importantly...
All right, I'm going to speak to the guys out there. If you're with a woman that is toxic like this, actually, I'm going to speak to everybody. If you are with somebody that's that toxic, that's pulling this kind of crap, you need to just quietly leave them. And sometimes it's easier said than done. But you can't be constantly berated, constantly told you're a piece of shit. You can't be physically harmed. I mean, if you love somebody, you love them, and it shouldn't be that hard to get along. But sometimes people have personality problems, and those people, you just need to leave them in the dust.
You heard from Ms. Heard yourselves on multiple audio recordings admitting to being physically violent with Mr. Depp. What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties, is Mr. Depp ever admitting to hitting, punching, or kicking Ms. Heard. You didn't hear it. It doesn't exist. It didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia and the Bahamas, you never heard Ms. Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault. Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol, Ms. Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong. But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings.
That's an interesting point because, nobody's perfect, right? And if you have a situation where you don't admit any bad fact against you, no one's going to believe it. And that's what she's kind of getting at here.
As much as Ms. Heard and her lawyers have tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Ms. Heard that repeatedly admits to violence. So let's talk about the giant lie at the heart of this case. Ms. Heard's claim that Mr. Depp is an abusive monster and that she is a public figure representing domestic abuse. She spun a story of shocking, overwhelming, brutal abuse. She came into this courtroom prepared to give the performance of her life, and she gave it. Ms. Heard's acting coach, Christina Sexton, testified that Ms. Heard has difficulty crying when she is acting. You saw it.
This is a great line. I love this.
Ms. Heard sobbing without tears, while spinning elaborate, exaggerated, fantastical accounts of abuse. And
My dog stepped on a bee. He really did. My dog stepped on a fucking bee. When you're sitting there crying and not a single tear comes out, that's a tell. That is an absolute tell that she's acting on the stand. And not very well, I might add.
Everything going on in her mind almost a decade prior while enduring that abuse. It was a performance. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it. Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Ms. Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Ms. Heard got up on that stand in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse.
First of all, that tale that she tells is absolutely horrific. And why he wouldn't have been brought up on criminal charges, that's sexual assault in the first degree. Ridiculous. And when Camille says you either believe all of it or none of it, there's a Latin phrase that they teach you in law school. It's called falso in uno, falso in omnibus, which means if you're lying about one thing, you're lying about everything. So you can disregard somebody's entire testimony by one lie. And that's kind of what she's talking about here.
Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely anything. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Aaron Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colber, Morgan Knight, Morgan Tremaine, Officers Melissa Sines, Officers Tyler Haddon, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly Leonard.
See what she did there? That was masterful. Remember what she did during the cross-examination of Amber Heard during her rebuttal? She lined up all those witnesses, and that's exactly what she's doing here in the closing argument. It just meshes. It just fits. So this isn't Depp versus Heard. This is Heard versus Depp, and then she lines them all up because all those witnesses corroborated Johnny Depp's version and discredited. They can't all be lying, can they?
What Ms. Heard testified to in this courtroom is the story of far too many women. But the overwhelming evidence and weight of that evidence shows that it's not her story. It's not Ms. Heard's story.
When she talks about the overwhelming weight of the evidence, in civil cases, in a criminal case, the proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest burden. That's what I'm used to. In a civil case, it's just preponderance of the evidence. So Johnny Depp only has to prove it's slightly more true than not true. And if he does that, he wins his defamation claim.
It was an act of profound cruelty, not just to Mr. Depp, but to true survivors of domestic abuse. For Ms. Heard to hold herself out as a public figure representing domestic abuse. It was false, it was defamatory, and it caused irreparable harm.
So here's the thing. Whether Johnny Depp wins this trial or not, public sentiment seems to have shifted in his favor. And to that end, he wins, even if he doesn't get a good verdict in this case.
And to talk more about that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and my friend, Mr. Chu.
As Ms. Vasquez said, you have now come to know the real Amber Heard. Scary. We also told you at the start of this trial that you were going to come to know the real Johnny Depp, not the many characters you've seen him play so wonderfully in the movies, but the man himself. We kept that promise. You've met the real Johnny Depp. Before Amber Heard, ladies and gentlemen, no woman ever before Amber Heard ever claimed that Mr. Depp raised a hand to her in his 58 years. And
that's kind of an important fact, because you don't just all of a sudden start being a dick. You don't all of a sudden start just beating on somebody. I've seen this happen with guys who are wife beaters, and that's who they are, and they're very difficult people to represent, to be quite honest with you, because nothing is ever their fault. They're cheap, and she's always to blame. It's just ridiculous. So I like the point that he's making there.
And no other woman since Ms. Heard made that false claim back on May 27th, 2016, and repeated it in her December 2018 op-ed. Has any woman come forward since? This is Me Too without any Me Too. To the contrary, ladies and gentlemen, you heard Kate Moss 2 days ago testify.
Now, if you remember that Kate Moss testimony, that was completely unnecessary, a completely unforced error by Amber Heard. She created this image of Johnny Depp running to her rescue and saving her, the exact opposite. And had she not testified about that, Kate Moss wouldn't have been allowed to testify.
A woman who has never testified in any proceeding, ever, a very private person, testified that Mr. Depp never abused her and that Ms. Heard lied to you. And she lied to you twice. Beyond the personal and emotional effects of Ms. Heard's lies, their impact on Mr. Depp and his family, the damage she inflicted on his reputation and career is undeniable. There's an old saying that a good reputation takes a lifetime to build, but only a second to destroy. Mr. Depp spent, in fact, a lifetime building his reputation as one of the greatest actors and movie stars of his generation, an iconic figure respected and liked throughout Hollywood and recognized and admired throughout the world. As you heard in this case, Amber Heard is not a true victim, and Mr. Depp certainly is not an abuser. Again, nobody has come out of the woodwork to say, Me Too. This is the unique and singular Me Too case where there's not a single Me Too. While Mr. Depp's name will be forever tarnished by these horrendous and false allegations, this case is about telling you his story and the truth about what really happened, which you've now heard. It is about restoring.
The other thing is, and it gets a little drawn out, but they have to go through damages. And if you look at the difference between Johnny Depp's damages and Amber Heard's damages, I think what she did is she just looked at his number and doubled it. I'm almost positive that's what she did, 100 million. And I don't think she proved any of her damages. So let's take a look at the closing argument for, or just some of the highlights of the closing argument for Amber Heard's team.
You don't leave Mr. Depp. And if you do, he will start a campaign of global humiliation against you. A smear campaign that lasts to this very day. He will do everything he can.
Now, maybe it's because I am more pro-Depp, because I just kind of like their team better. But I don't know, this guy's voice bugs me.
To destroy your life, to destroy your career. That is what they're saying, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what they're trying to get you, the jury, to be an accomplice to. But it's not surprising, because Mr. Depp cannot and will not take responsibility for his own actions. It's always someone else's fault. Does the First Amendment...
That's interesting, because it's exactly what I've said about Amber Heard.
Give Ms. Heard the right to write the words that she wrote in this article on December 18th, 2018.
So the First Amendment's an interesting argument here, because the First Amendment really protects speech, but not all speech. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. But it protects you against government action. It doesn't protect you against private action. So it's a little bit misplaced, I think.
That's the question. And you cannot simultaneously protect and uphold the First Amendment and find in favor of Johnny Depp on his claim. You simply cannot. You have to decide, should someone be able to write an article like that in the United States of America without being sued successfully, without having to go through the hell that Ms. Heard has gone through? Think about every piece of evidence that you've heard over the last 6 weeks.
So his First Amendment argument is interesting, because it's I mean, that's what he comes out with. He doesn't come out with the allegations are true. I mean, which is really the ultimate defense to this, and which is what I would have come out of the block. I don't know why you would come out right away with the First Amendment argument. It seems weaker than you can't find for her because, or you can't find for him because it's true.
About his abuse, about their relationship. None of that is in the article. None of it. We all know that it would be a very different article if she had written about what she suffered, that she's told you about over the last 6 weeks. Because he knows the words are true, Mr. Depp says that the words now have a defamatory implication. He says the statements are the same as saying, Johnny Depp abused me. But just because he wants to make the article about himself doesn't mean it is.
She said it was about him. So he's contradicting the testimony of his own client.
He has to show you that any defamatory implication was designed and intended. Look at number 4. Designed and intended by Ms. Heard to convey the defamatory meaning that he suggests.
So one of the things you do in a closing argument is you can put up the elements, and that's what they've done here, is just put the elements of what needs to be proven.
Just because people might read the article and remember, oh yeah, Amber Heard used to be married to Johnny Depp, and she accused him of abuse, that doesn't mean that she designed and intended defamatory implications in writing about herself. And think about it. If Mr. Depp is right, then virtually any statement that anyone could ever make about their own life that implies anything, implies any involvement with any other person, could be defamatory. And
that's not true. I mean, you can't. These are highly, highly, highly visible people, and the words matter.
It's clearly not what the First Amendment intends. She didn't design and intend the words to be the equivalent of writing Johnny Depp abused me. And you don't have to take her words for it. You can take the words of Terrence Doherty of the ACLU. He said that the op-ed wasn't even Ms. Heard's idea. The ACLU wrote the first draft, and great care was taken in drafting the article so as not to make it about Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard's relationship with him.
Again, he's contradicting his own client.
That's the only evidence presented about Ms. Heard's motive, except her statements that was exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to talk about her experiences after Johnny Depp. Ms. Heard didn't write the headline. She didn't approve the headline. She had nothing to do with it. She was not given notice of the headline. She testified, you saw her testify about the sexual assault that she experienced at the hands of Mr. Depp. You saw her testify about that they're calling her a liar. You saw her on the stand testify with your own mouth, with her own mouth, exactly what she went through for the first time in court, because people who have suffered that, they don't want to broadcast that to the world. They want to penalize Ms. Heard for not speaking about that earlier. That's ridiculous, and it's insulting, and it's just victim blaming at its most disgusting. The only reference to sexual assault in the article, and you can read the op-ed, is sexual assault that she said she had experienced by the time she was of college age, before Mr. Depp. So there is a reference to sexual violence in that article, but it's not by Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp can't hold her liable for a headline she didn't write. It contained something that was not about him. And they want you to think that she republished the headline by tweeting out the link to the online version. So let's look at this. This is the tweet.
So this gets a little drawn out, but you sort of get the point. I mean, the difference between the two sides is stark, I think.
You can't give him anything. They didn't tell you that, but the court told you that. And that's a very, very important thing here. He told his story. He had his opportunities. He had his full opportunities to do all of that. And he came in here and lied to you and said he's here to get him.
The difference between Mr. Rattenburn and Elaine, she's speaking with a lot more passion. And not super big fan of hers, but she sounds more like a prosecutor.
Reputation back. It's just one of many lies in this case, but it's a really big one, because here we are, 6 weeks of your time, precious time, 6 weeks of this court's time, for what? For nothing. Only to go after Amber. That's psychological abuse. He's going after Amber for nothing, because he wants to put her through this again, the third time. So we're fighting back, and that's the counterclaim. She finally has said enough, enough. And we're asking you to finally hold this man responsible. He has never accepted responsibility.
See, that's actually, the way she's going about it is actually, that man, I think that's effective.
For anything in his life. Once again, the next day, Johnny apologizes to Amber. He says in 2 different text messages, that's 772 and 773, he says, my profound apologies in one of them, and my apologies are eternal in the other one. What is he apologizing for the next day on May 22nd if he didn't know that he did all of those things? She wasn't wearing any makeup. She was natural. She wasn't wearing a stitch of makeup. Every one of them says it. It's the exact same thing. Well, why would you say that? She's an actor. She's not going to go outside her house, without putting makeup on. And if she has bruises, why on earth, when she's been covering them up for 4 years, why on earth would she not put makeup on so that she would cover those up? Why on earth would she not want to cover up those bruises? It makes no sense. But you know what? You guys saw her here. You guys saw it.
So that is an interesting fact that she just brought up. And lo and behold, when TMZ's there at the courthouse, the only time they're displayed, she's not wearing makeup.
You saw Amber on the stand. There were days where she didn't wear eye makeup. A lot of people think that she's not wearing makeup when she doesn't have mascara and eyeliner on. She has different looks, and some of them are with eye makeup and some of them are without. And people misunderstand, especially people that aren't that good at makeup, and a lot of men, frankly, go, oh, then she probably doesn't have makeup. And that's where that mistake happens. But you heard her testimony, and you heard her makeup artist testimony saying she doesn't go out of her room without concealer and foundation. She knows how to put these things in.
But somehow she's at the courthouse. Look at my bruise from her bruise kit.
And you decide Defendant's Exhibit 155, and you'll have the actual thing in there. That's the type of palette she used, and she was very adept at telling you what colors she puts on for
Her bruise kit.
different days of bruises. This is a woman who for 4 years did everything she could to cover up anybody knowing anything about this abuse. Do you honestly think she's just going to walk around for the week with her bruises exposed? Of course she's not. If you do the math, Amber is entitled to at least 31.5. What does she take?
31.5. Well, you asked for 100, so now you're down to 31.5?
$7 million. What does she do with the $7 million? She gives it to charity, or she intends to give it to charity. Now, they make much ado about the pledge versus donation, but both the corporate designees for ACLU and for Children's Hospital said donation and pledge are interchangeable. These are pledges. The ACLU corporate designee said.
So next week, when it comes time for payroll, I'm just going to pledge to my employees their payroll. Because we just pledge it. It's the same thing as getting paid, right?
You typically do pledges because of the tax benefits, and that's what she said. She pledged it over a period of time because of the tax implications to it.
But she hasn't paid shit. I mean, I wouldn't even bring this up because she looks like it's just a losing argument.
To it, and because she was getting paid over the time. Now, she started to make these donations, and you'll see that the first one was on behalf of Mr. Depp's business manager, Mr. White, actually sent the letters with the $100,000 for each of those. That was the initial ones. He was trying to take credit for those, and in fact, both the ACLU and Children's Hospital got confused and gave the credit to Mr. Depp, not to Amber, for those. Then she made payments to both, and Elon Musk also made payments to
She ain't made shit. It's everybody else paying.
Both for $500,000 each, which she didn't count to her pledge, but they helped those organizations. At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because she spent $6 million in attorney's fees. That is unrefuted. She still intends to.
She just said she spent $6 million in attorney's fees. $6 million.
Pay those pledges, honor those pledges, and she said that throughout.
See the look on Camille's face when she said $6 million?
Throughout, and I elicited from both the ACLU and from Children's Hospital, they haven't expired. She can pay them whenever she wants to, and she fully intends to. But she has to get out from under this first. They started to get Amber fired from Aquaman 2. They have continued to this day. They have followed her everywhere.
So we don't need to watch any more of that. Here's the thing. The difference in caliber lawyers is just stark. It really is stark. The difference in approach to the case is stark. Amber's not going to get squat. She'll be denied her counterclaim. I think Johnny Depp will win this case, but I don't know for sure. You never know what a jury's going to focus on. You never know what they're going to hang their hat on. I just had a case where the jury could not decide after 3 days of deliberation, and it's a tough thing trying a case. It really is, but it's fun. It's so rewarding, and at the end of the day, when they got done, and I guarantee you those lawyers know Johnny Depp better than anybody else. And it looks like they gelled as a team. It looks like he gelled with his lawyers. So now the jury's going to deliberate. And they've got a lot. They sat for 6 or 7 weeks in the trial. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. So we'll continue to follow it. You guys follow us. Subscribe. Like. Comment. I read the comments. And follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Sign up for Patreon. Spread the word. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.